Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Monster Making 101 with me, Bill Buckhalter. You can also find me on Facebook and YouTube as Buck Wiley DM. And today we're going to do one of my first requests from a viewer. A friend of mine, Dave, asked that we create a Lamia Matriarch for him. So that's going to be our project for today. We're going to dive right in and look a little bit at the Lamia over the years. The Lamia has changed quite a bit from first edition all the way to what we have today for 5th edition. The stat block that I've got up right now is the 5th edition version, and the pictures show you the black and white photo there is what the Lamia looked like in my original advanced D&D monster manual. In 4th edition, it was really weird. The Lamia had bugs and everything all over it. It actually was a woman that could transform and have scarabs all over her. The 5th edition version uses a woman's torso with a lion's body, but the typical mythological Lamia that most people are probably used to is the one that has the torso of a woman and the lower body of a snake or a serpent. And that's kind of what we're going to shoot for today. We're going to make something that maybe is more true to the mythological version of a Lamia and less the lion version of 5th edition, but we're still going to have some of those characteristics. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the website that I showed you last week called Kobold Fight Club. We're going to try to design this for Dave's encounter that he's looking to build. He has a party of 11th level characters, and he runs anywhere from 4 to 6 players each week depending on who shows up. So we're going to try to build a hard encounter for somewhere between 4 to 6 level 11 players. So I did a little work on this earlier and figured out that for a group of 6 level 11 players, a CR8 creature is about the right spot for this particular build. If we throw in a few chain devils as just placeholders and we put 3 of those in, we see that that's a hard encounter for 6 players. Now, if Dave has a few people not show up and he's down to just 4 players, that becomes deadly. So what he can easily do is just remove 1 and go down to 2, and it becomes a hard encounter again. So it's easy to adjust by using CR8. So that's where we're going to build our creature today. All right, so we'll open up our Monster Maker software again. If you haven't watched any of my other videos, I highly recommend this program. It's by a group called the Genius Inc. You can download it. Their website's right there on the screen. I'll put a link down in the description as well. The Monster Maker is the program that I use for building monsters, and I find it very helpful, and I highly recommend that you download that and maybe toss $1 or $2 to the developers. I've already gone ahead and I've filled in some of this information up top based on the 5th edition Lamia. So today we're making a Lamia Matriarch. Of course, it's going to be female, and the size is going to be large. It's a monstrosity, and the alignment is chaotic evil. We figured out that we're going to want a challenge rating 8 creature. So we'll go down here to the challenge rating drop down and pull that up. I've already filled in the ability scores as well, and these scores again are based on the 5th edition version. All I've done is, for a bit of a greater challenge, I've increased the strength from 16 to 18, and I've increased the constitution from 14 to 16. What this will do is give it a little more deadly attacks, and it will give it more hit points. So we'll come up here to the hit points and use our rule of thumb that our hit dice will be twice our CR. So we're going to start with 16 hit dice. It's a large creature, so they will be D10s. When we generate those hit points, we see that that's 136 hit points. So if we look real quick at our monster statistics by challenge rating table, for a CR8 creature, it expects that it would have somewhere in the neighborhood of 176 to 190 hit points. and we only had 136. So at first glance, you would think we're a little bit low. But I'm not going to worry about that right now, because I know that as I build this creature, I want to give it some damage resistances and immunities, which a normal Lamia does not have. And if you recall from previous builds, when you give a creature resistances and immunities, then you need to increase its effective hit points. So even though we seem like we're a little bit low, I'm not going to panic just yet. We're going to leave it alone and continue with our build and verify it when we come back later. I'm also bumping the armor class up to 16, which is a little bit more in line with what a CR8 creature should have. Speed-wise, we're going to leave the speed at 30. I don't think we're going to change that at all, and I don't think we're going to give this creature any saving throw bonuses. As far as senses go, this creature will have dark vision, so we'll go ahead and add in 60 feet of dark vision. We'll also give it the ability to speak both Abyssal and Common. Abyssal is something that the 5th edition Lamia can speak. We're also going to give this creature some skills. So we're going to give it Deception. We're going to give it Insight and add that skill in. And we're also going to give it Stealth. So these are all skills that the normal 5th edition Lamia has. Up to this point, we're pretty much just copying what that creature already has. So we'll do a quick preview right here, and we'll see that we have the beginnings of our creature. Now, this is where we'll get into the damage modification. And again, this is what's going to help with our hit points. Our creature is going to be more serpentine. We are going to build something that's closer to the mythological Lamia as opposed to the 5th edition. So this is where we're going to start to deviate a bit. The 5th edition version of the Lamia doesn't have any resistances or immunities or anything like that. But we are going to give ours an immunity to poison, because with it being a snake or a serpent-like creature, it definitely isn't going to be affected by any kind of poison. So we're going to make it immune to that. We're also going to make it immune to being poisoned. So neither of those conditions are going to do anything to it. And then I am also going to give it resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical weapons. Okay, so this is a magic creature. Lamias, both mythologically and in Dungeons & Dragons, have always been magic creatures, magic users. So I think if you're not using magic back, you're going to have a disadvantage against this creature. So now it's time to start adding this creature's actions and abilities. And one of the first things we need to do is add an ability for the Lamia to use spellcasting. This is something I haven't done in one of my videos yet, so I want to show you this in a little bit of detail. So we start by adding an ability with the Add Ability button there. There's a tab here that we've kind of ignored up to this point for spellcasting. So when we click on the spellcasting tab, we'll see that there's a lot of options here that we have to fill in. The first choice we have to make is whether this creature is an innate spellcaster or whether they cast a specific spells of a specific class. Sometimes you'll see creatures that say this creature is a 5th level sorcerer, or this creature is a 8th level wizard. And then they have spells that you would expect from that class. And if you have that kind of a creature, you can put that information in here. By comparison, innate spellcasting creatures have just a set level of spells that they can cast. They are specific just to that creature. They're not necessarily from any one class. That we do by checking this box right here that says innate spellcasting. We do have to tell it what its casting ability is, and in this case, our Lamia uses Charisma for her spellcasting modifier. Then our Lamia is going to cast pretty much the same spells that a normal one would. The first spell that the Lamia can cast is Disguise Self. Times per day, if we leave that at 0, the program treats it like a cantrip. Okay, so in other words, it can cast that spell as many times as it would like. We push the add spell button and it puts it down here in our list. The other spell that the Lamia has is Major Image. And again, this is a cantrip, so we'll leave the times per day at 0 and we'll just hit the add spell button. Now 3 times per day, the Lamia has a number of spells that it can cast. Okay, so we've added those in. As you can see, she can cast Charm Person, Mirror Image, Scrying, and Suggestion all 3 times per day. Now, as you're aware, she can't cast each of those 3 times per day, but 3 times per day she can select from that list. So the Lamia has one spell that it can cast once per day, and that's the Gesh spell. And so that adds to the list as well. Now we hit the save button here, and when we do a preview, we can see that now we've added innate spell casting. The spell casting ability is Charisma, and the Matriarch can innately cast the following spells. At will is the Disguised Self and the Major Image. 3 times per day she can choose from Charm Person, Mirror Image, Scrying, and Suggestion. And once per day she can cast the Gesh spell. Next, we're going to add another ability. And for this, I want to give her magic resistance. This is a magic creature, and so it's going to be difficult to land spells against her. So she's going to have advantage on all saving throws against magic effects. So now it's time to get into the actions portion of the creature. We're going to start with giving the Matriarch the ability to attack with a scimitar. So that's going to be a weapon attack, which we should be very familiar with by now. We've done a lot of these. It's going to use her strength. So she's going to get a +7 to hit. It's going to be 1 creature. She is a large creature, so we're going to go ahead and make that damage dice be 2d8, and that will be slashing damage. Nothing special about this on a hit, and it just has a reach of 5, so we'll save that. So the next thing I want to do is add the ability for the Lamia Matriarch to constrict. She has a snake-like body, so I want to use that as part of her attacks. So we're going to add another action and make a weapon attack here called Constrict. If I can type. It's going to be a melee weapon attack. It's going to use her strength. The target is going to be 1 creature. And the damage on this, we are going to use the Yuan-Ti Abomination as sort of the template for how we want to build this ability. We're going to use the same thing that that creature has for our creature. So the Abomination, when it hits with its tail and does its constrict attack, does 2d6 damage, and that's bludgeoning damage. And then it has a whole bunch of ability text after that, which says that basically when it hits, it also grapples the creature. So we're going to add all that text in here in this field. Okay, so I've typed all of that in. I also gave the ability a reach of 10 because she has this long tail, so I want her to be able to whip that out and constrict people with a little bit of reach there. So after we add our constrict attack, let's update our preview and take a look at that. You can see here that we have constrict with a +7 to hit, a reach of 10. It does the 2d6 +4 bludgeoning damage, and the target is grappled with an escape DC of 16. Well, where does that escape DC come from? Well, if you look at the monster statistics by challenge rating table, a CR8 creature, whenever it has a save DC, it should be 16. Okay, so that's where I came up with that number. Also, it says that until the grapple ends, the target is restrained and the Matriarch cannot constrict another target. That's important because if you recall, we talked about this last week with the King of Feathers. When you grapple something all by itself, that's not that big of a hindrance other than the fact that the creature now can't move. But when you add in restrained as well, that adds some other complications for the creature. When you're restrained, attacks against you have advantage, and you have disadvantage on dexterity saves, so it makes it a little tougher to escape. So the restrained portion there is an extra little factor of difficulty. The last thing I want to do here now is add a multi-attack, as a creature of this level would probably have. So we're going to say that the Lamia Matriarch makes 2 attacks, but I am going to restrict that only one of those attacks may be a constrict. And we'll move, as we always do, we'll move multi-attack to the top and do a preview. And now I think we're in pretty good shape. So up to this point, we've built this matriarch, and she hasn't strayed too far from the normal Lamia. We've given her some resistances. She has the constrict ability. We've made her more like a snake than a lion. But there's nothing here yet that really makes me feel like this creature is higher powered or any different than a normal Lamia. The next ability I want to give, I think, is the one that's going to add that little extra to the character and make it more interesting. And that is going to be a recharge ability for the matriarch to summon some thralls, some minions, to come and fight with her. So we're going to start by pressing the Add Action button. We're going to come here to the Action tab, and we're going to call this Summon Thrall. And we're going to allow this ability to recharge just on a 6 because I don't want it to be something that the matriarch does a lot. I just want her to be able to bring these little minions in to make the fight have just a little bit of a twist. So the way I'm going to word this ability is that the Lamia Matriarch calls 1d4 thralls, and in parentheses I've put cultists, so the DM knows that he basically is just going to use the cultist stat block. So she calls 1d4 thralls to aid her in battle. Add the thralls within 5 feet of the matriarch, and they act on her initiative. The DM doesn't have to do a lot of extra work here, doesn't have to roll initiative for each of these, just places them on the board around the matriarch and uses them on her turn. And one thing I do want to look at before we go too much further is go back to the Kobold Fight Club where we were looking originally and see what this is going to do to the fight, right? We were figuring a fight with 6 level 11 characters and 3 Lamia matriarchs, okay, at a CR of 8. We've used the Chain Devil as kind of a placeholder for our matriarch. So if we look up the cultists, okay, and we see that those are only CR 1/8 creatures, so they're fairly weak. So let's say that our matriarch summons, worst case scenario, she summons 4 of these, right? If we add 4 into the fight, it bumps up to deadly. It becomes a tough fight. If she only summons 3, it's still a hard fight, but it's probably right on the border there, right? As a DM, you keep these kind of things in mind. Maybe you don't summon the cultists with all of the matriarchs. Maybe only one of them summons cultists. Maybe you start the fight with fewer matriarchs. Maybe you start the fight with only 2 matriarchs. But then you have both of them summon cultists, and if you ended up with 6 cultists and 2 matriarchs, now suddenly that's a hard fight again, right? Again, it gives the DM some flexibility. If maybe only 5 players showed up that week instead of 6, then you start with 2 Lamias and you summon maybe only 3 or 4 cultists. And that gets you to a hard encounter. If you only have 4 players show up, then you probably want to just use your 2 Lamias and ignore that ability altogether and not summon any cultists, because no matter how many you start summoning, it makes the encounter deadly. So you have to keep these kind of things in mind, but an ability like this gives the DM some flexibility. If the party is really doing well and the fight doesn't seem to be challenging them enough, well, summon more of the thralls. If the party is really struggling against the matriarch and they're not doing very well, then maybe you think about holding back with that ability. It's just another tool in the toolbox that the DM can use to make the fight more interesting. Okay, so with that ability added in, we update our preview and we see that the Summon Thrall ability is now added. And I think that gets us to the end. I think our matriarch here is done. Okay, so if you've watched my other videos, you know that the last thing I always do is make sure that we have accurately built our creature. And so let's go back to our monster statistics by challenge rating table and check that before we finish. We start by looking at our hit points, and our creature has 136 hit points. As we noted earlier, that's kind of low, but we gave this creature immunity to poison, and so that's going to require that we up our hit points by a factor of 50%. So when you take 136 and you add 50%, you get 204 hit points. 204 hit points is something you would expect from a CR9 creature. So we're actually a little bit tougher defensively than our CR of 8. A CR9 creature does have an armor class of 16, so we're good there. But we have to make a couple other adjustments for the armor class. The first is the fact that we gave our creature magic resistance. Magic resistance effectively increases your armor class by 2. And then we gave our creature the ability to constrict. Also effectively increases armor class by 1. So at this point, we have an armor class of 19 effectively. So that means we've got to bump our defensive CR up 1 more. So we're actually looking at a defensive CR of about 10. Offensively, if we go back to our stat block, we can see that the Lamia is basically going to make 2 attacks per round. Probably in the first round, that's going to be a constrict attack and a scimitar attack. The constrict attack is going to do 11 points of damage. The scimitar attack is going to do 13. So that's a total of 24 points of damage in the first round. Second round, it'll probably still have that creature constricted, so it'll do 2 scimitar attacks. That will be a total of 26 points of damage. And then the same thing in the third round for another 26 points of damage. So our average damage is right there around 25, 26 points of damage per round. The other thing you have to check is this creature is a spellcaster. So do any of the spells that we gave the creature do more damage than the attacks that we gave it? Well, in this case, most of the Lamia's spells are defensive spells and they are non-damaging spells. So we're not really going to use any of those to factor in our offensive challenge rating. The Charm Person maybe is a little offensive, but even when you look in the Dungeon Master's Guide, the ability to charm does not affect challenge rating in any way. So we're just going to ignore those. The ability to summon the thralls, that's a sticking point. It depends on who you ask whether that should affect your challenge rating or not. But in general, the thought is that the ability to summon in and of itself doesn't affect the challenge rating. But as we showed with the Kobold Fight Club, a DM has to be aware that when those thralls do get summoned, it changes the overall challenge of the entire encounter. So you have to build that into your encounter when you decide how many of these Lamia Matriarchs you're going to throw at your party. Remember that it's not just the Lamia Matriarchs, it's those Matriarchs and any of the thralls that they summon. So it doesn't necessarily affect the CR of the Matriarch, but it definitely affects the challenge rating of your encounter. So going back to the statistics by challenge rating table, if we're doing about 25, 26 points of damage per round, that is only a CR3 creature. A CR3 creature would have an attack bonus of +4. Our attack bonus is +7. So we're going to have to bump that up 1 CR and say that we are a CR4 offensively. So we have a CR4 offensively, a CR10 defensively. So our average challenge rating is about a CR7. We actually might be a little underpowered. We might not be the challenge rating that we thought we were. So how do we fix that? Well, there's a number of ways we could go about fixing this. We could obviously give our matriarch a little more damage. We could either up her damage dice or maybe add something to her attack. I know as a serpentine Lamia, maybe we'd want to throw some poison damage in there somewhere and see how that affects things. We could possibly give her more attacks. We could increase her multi-attack and give her the ability to attack 3 times. There's a lot of different things we can do. Let's play around with it and see what we can do to make this creature closer to that CR8. Okay, so I went back and modified our Lamia's attacks just a little bit to try to give her a bit more damage. What I did was I went to the scimitar attack and I did add some poison damage. I put in 2d6 poison damage. This is, after all, a serpentine creature, so it's not out of the realm of possibility to think that it poisons its blade. And then I upped the damage on the constrict attack from 2d6 to 3d8. That made that constrict attack quite a bit more damaging when it initially hits. By making these changes, I made my damage per round effectively 39 points per round. When we look back at our table, that just barely gets us on the cusp of being about a CR6 creature. CR6 creature would have an attack bonus of +6. Ours is an attack bonus of +7, not enough to give us a CR bump, but it does tell us we're a little bit tougher. So I'm comfortable that we're right in that CR6 offensive challenge rating. We know that we had a CR10 for our defense, and the average of 6 and 10 is 8, which is where we're built. So we're pretty close. But as a DM, what I would keep in mind with this creature is that I would expect it to be tough. It's not going to die easy because we have a high CR from a defensive standpoint, but it's not necessarily going to deal a lot of damage like a CR8 creature would. So I'll keep that in mind during my fight and use the minions, the thralls that it can summon, as a way to kind of balance that and make the encounter the challenge that I'm looking for. Okay, so in the end, this is the stat block that we ended up with. I'll go ahead and post a link in the description to it if you'd like to download it and use it in your home games. If you do, please drop me a comment and let me know how it worked out for you. I'd love to hear how some of these monsters that we're building are working for you guys. Also, don't forget to post in the comments with creatures that you would like to see created. I'm happy to use these videos to help you create creatures for your home games, give you the tips and tricks that you need to start building your own monsters. Thanks once again for tuning in. My name's Bill Buckhalter. You can find me on Facebook and YouTube as Buck Wiley DM. Thanks for watching and happy gaming.